This is Citizens for an Open and Responsible Edgewood, bringing you another council update. Today is November 23rd, 2019, and today we will be recapping the town meeting that occurred on Wednesday, November 20th, 2019. My name is Adrian Terry. I'm joined again today by Jerry Powers, and we'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who showed up to the core public forum that we hosted at Legacy Church on November 14th. We're hopeful that the information we provided you at that meeting was enlightening, informative, and would spur you to take action to continue to participate in the decisions the town is making and to remain vigilant, because the town is not always forthright and transparent about what it is that they're doing. The agenda for the November 20th meeting was relatively nondescript, and it didn't look like there was much business that was going to be discussed. But it actually turns out that the meeting was very revealing. A lot of information was disclosed, and there was some contentious discussion about certain members of the town's governing body who just don't seem responsive to public input. A couple of issues that were concealed by the agenda or not revealed by the agenda that ultimately came out in the meeting included the EPCOR takeover, the construction of residential sewer collection lines, and the possible closure of an equestrian center that the town doesn't seem to want to maintain any longer. With that, we want to show you some clips today. And we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to hear some of the discussion from the town's governing body in their own words. We'll also share with you some of the public comments that were received at the meeting. It was a good turnout. The room was packed, and we believe that this is probably the largest crowd that has come to a town meeting in recent history, other than the Second Amendment issue earlier this year.
And I'd just like to say that at the end of this video recap, we're going to be updating you on the action steps that were outlined at our November 14 meeting. We heard you loud and clear. People want action on the changing this government to a more open form. So there were several pathways that were discussed that night. There was a ballot initiative to force a new election. There was removal of certain members of the town council. There were action items to challenge the ability of the town council to autonomously extend their terms for 2 years. So we're going to be given an update, so please stay tuned. For those of you that weren't able to attend the council meeting, this is probably the only way to get updated on what is really happening. And once again, I want to thank everybody, as you did, for showing up at both meetings. These were two of the most well-attended meetings in Edgewood town history. Over 300 people at the November 14 meeting. The house was packed the other night, and there were people standing in the back because there was no seating for them.
As typical for recent town meetings, after the approval of the agenda, the mayor continued with his rebuke of the audience, structuring the public input in such a way that it makes it very difficult to participate. A couple of things that were of note is that in the mayor's recitation of the rules of order for the meeting, he said cursing, name-calling, and any type of verbal abuse will not be tolerated.
And then he proceeded to break all of his own rules for himself. He cursed at the audience. There were name-calling. I think he called us those two idiots on social media. But that wasn't the worst of it. So we'll play some clips of that. You can see for yourself.
This only goes to the Bassett's. Well, that's not how this should be. And you go on down in it, and we find somebody else at that meeting who picks that up. Councilor Abraham then referenced something Mr. Mahoney had said earlier and asked the mayor to clarify in the plans which lines cross Bassett property. This is nuts. We shouldn't have that, she says. She knew about it. She seen those plans. Tom Torres brought in a set of plans. Tom Torres brought in stuff begging for a line to be run down Cactus. Jeremiah Turner showed up 3 years running asking for the same thing. Can we get a sewer line out into this property here? He got turned down every time. People now are saying, you hear Councilor Jaramillo, well, this is all wrong. This is all wrong. No, this is something that went going clear back to like 2003, when they first put in the line under that new bridge there at I-40. He was contacting the town, we contacted the town, can you do anything? They pushed us off over many years. This was something that we felt was, the time had come to do it. So we did it. With full knowledge of the public, full knowledge of the council, and anybody that was well enough to get off their dead ass and come out to the meetings where we voted on it and did stuff.
So here you've got the mayor cursing at the audience, and he's trying to defend the indefensible. This is about the sewer lines we found out that run onto his private property that were paid for by the town. And it's interesting because this is Mayor Bassett trying to persuade the audience. This is one of his better days, how he's treating the audience, but he's still violating his own rules, being condescending, disrespectful. And what he's going on about here is he's making several admissions that actually disprove what he's trying to defend. So the sewer line that went to the Bassett property, he's saying was all these people wanted it on their property. If they just came to the meetings, if they got off their whatever he said, came to the meetings, they'd understand that this was perfectly acceptable, an open process, et cetera, which it's not. So on this petition now, you've got Josephine Bassett, which is his mother, and it went to Jean Bassett's property. You've got the Catholic Church. So the original sewer, before they did the Bassett extension, went like so, down Cactus. This is Cactus Street up here.
Church Street.
I'm sorry, Church Street. So the extension then was done up Cactus Street, and I'll put that on here. So this is where it went, and then it turned and went out here into the mayor's field. So where it should have gone was up Main Street. So I'll put that on here. It actually went up here to the community center, but it should have gone Main Street right here. So Jeremiah Turner was on that petition. He owns the Dairy Queen, which I'm going to mark the Dairy Queen here. This is where the Dairy Queen is. So it's a false argument that one of the people that needed it was Dairy Queen because it goes right in front of their front door, right down 344. They could have hooked up there at any time.
And there's a manhole cover right there at the parking lot.
Right. So why spend $1.3 million to run it all the way around the backside and come up his backside? There's really no reason for that. So the other person they're talking about on that petition is the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church property is actually right here and here. There's two lots. So as you can see, this green line, it didn't run out Main Street. It didn't go by the Catholic Church. So one person on there, the Dairy Queen, didn't need it because they had it at their front door. The Catholic Church didn't get it, and instead it turned and went where the yellow is out into the mayor's field. So you've really only got Josephine Bassett and you've got Jean Bassett, who signed the petition that won it, that got it. Now, Tom Torres also signed the petition, but he hasn't hooked up because the way they ran it forces him to spend a lot more money and have to have a pressure pump to push it in there. So really, the only people who got service here are the Bassetts, and he's misleading the public by saying all these people want it. There's just a handful there, and it's a completely fallacious argument in the beginning to say for 4 people or 5 people max, you want to spend $1.3 million of the town's money? I mean, that's a ridiculous assumption. And as you pointed out, Adrian, they're not doing quality of life improvements that people really do want. In the public processes that I've attended, like the comprehensive plan, they wanted trails, they wanted equestrian facilities, they wanted to be able to ride their horses and enjoy the rural nature here. Instead, we're doing these urban improvements of high density possibility sewer to the mayor's property.
And what's interesting is where the line was actually constructed is not in the public right of way.
That's correct. It goes right out on private property. And in my experience as a contractor and home builder, I've had to pay for every extension of not only sewer, but water, gas, electric, when it comes out onto my property. They'll put it in the road, which is where it belongs. That's the public right of way. And when I've run it out onto my property to build houses, I had to pay for that, which is the correct way to do it.
Next, we'd like to show you a clip from one of the members of the public who stood up and gave public comment at the council meeting. And this is representative of many of the comments that were received by the town council at the meeting, discussing what the people actually want, what they don't want, and how they feel about money that's wasted on infrastructure projects that do not benefit the public, but presumably only benefit one or two people.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. David Anderson. I am a resident of Edgewood, and I'm very concerned that money from the taxpaying public is being spent without telling the public what is occurring. I am also a customer of EPCOR. I'm a very satisfied customer of EPCOR. They are responsive to my needs. They're governed by the Public Utility Commission, so it's not as though we have a rogue company that's not treating its customers well. I am being well cared for by that company. I am not, however, being well represented by my town council. My town council wants to have a hostile takeover of a private corporation that's providing good service at a good value to its customers. I am also displeased with the fact that we're talking about putting in sewer for commercial areas, and our town is paying to run sewer to residential areas instead of fixing the treatment plant. I find that to be a gross misuse of our funds and those funds that the council has set aside for the plant. When I was in charge of a homeowners association, which was about 2/3 to 3/4 the size of the town of Edgewood in one of my last places, I would not spend a dime of my people's money without their approval. And I'm frankly appalled at the way that this is going without inputs and approval from the public. I moved back to New Mexico after my time in the Air Force because I love my state. I love the rural areas of New Mexico. That's why I live in Edgewood. I want this to be an area that is self-governed by the people, not by a small clique of 5. Thank you.
So you can see he's complaining about the very things that most people feel the same way, that, you know, instead of spending $1.3 million on a sewer that went just to benefit a few people, then they're not spending money on quality of life improvements like the equestrian center. And there again, the council members that should know about this didn't know about this. This came through members of the public through back channels that they are letting some of these equestrian facilities go, and possibly even losing a lease on the Echo Ridge open space. And besides not doing that, they could be spending this money on trails and things that people really want. You know, Edgewood's a great place to live. We all want to enjoy the rural environment. We don't have access because they're not building trails.
And with respect to the sewer system, as you heard from the public comment, this leaves a number of people in limbo who may want to move out to Edgewood, might be in the midst of construction, because what you're faced with is the cost of installing a septic system on your property, only to have to collapse it and decommission it within a matter of months or years as these collection lines move out to your property.
The other problem that I've got with it too, Adrian, is that I've seen this happen in Albuquerque, in a beautiful area in the North Valley where it was much like Edgewood. It was rural environment, people had horses, there are trails down there, but the area was kind of ruined because when the town of Albuquerque, the city of Albuquerque, ran their sewer and water lines down there, the planners love density. That's a new neo-urbanism idea. So they changed the zoning, which prevented high-density infill to increase this infill. They love this idea for some reason, but it turned out like Rio Rancho. It kind of ruined all those nice areas. So when the sewers run to these neighborhoods, it's only a matter of time till the planners are going to want to change the zoning to allow high-density infill. And I don't want to live in that. That's why I live in Edgewood.
Absolutely, I think that's true of a lot of people who live in this community and who want to maintain its rural character. One of the next items that we want to talk about that was discussed at the town council meeting on November 20th was the comprehensive plan. Now, the comprehensive plan for the town is a long-range planning document that kind of sets forth the vision of the town as it moves forward and serves as a guidepost for all future town actions. It's not a document that is controlling or authoritative so that we have to strictly adhere to it, but it certainly sets the course going forward, and it's important that we stay involved in pointing the direction of this town towards responsible spending as opposed to projects that don't make any sense. What we'd like to play you now is a clip from Councilor Sherry Abraham talking about some of the issues that were included in the report that don't seem to have any bearing whatsoever, including issues that were not included in the report.
I do have one question, Mayor. One of the questions that I see on the very first page, table of contents, under community profile, I see that you've addressed solid waste disposal, which the town doesn't do. You've addressed stormwater management, which the town doesn't do, and water supply, which the town doesn't have. But the one thing I see missing is a wastewater treatment plant. Any information about that at all, I didn't find in the comprehensive plan.
So you can see here that Councilor Abrahams is pointing out this document has stuff in it that seems to be completely irrelevant, and it's supposed to be put together in a public process by the people, right? But it's being steered in a direction, and we've got another clip that'll kind of show how it isn't really reflective of the meetings that you and I both attended, right? I was there, you were there, and a lot of this doesn't occur and isn't really included in the comprehensive plan planning stage, but it made it into the final document.
Isn't that interesting? So here's the clip.
To point out that the wording in here has been changed from what we saw last. And that's really concerning to me. It's, for example, on page, on page 37, where it's talking about the PER, which we haven't even been able to discuss as council. For EPCOR, it says the town of Edgewood hired Wilson and Company to develop a preliminary engineering report to assess the feasibility of the EPCOR water system purchase. The recommendation of the PER is to use eminent domain to obtain the facility. I cannot believe that is in here. You guys told me that EPCOR and the condemnation was not a topic in this process at all.
When did you hear that?
At the meeting here, when you guys presented it.
So you can see that Councilor Jaramillo is shocked that this is even in the document, and especially the way that it's phrased. They're using this document to try to justify what they already want to do, which they've been hiding in closed sessions from the public, and which the public is absolutely against. At our meeting of over 300 people, and the meeting at the council meeting, people were adamantly opposed. When we played that clip from Mr. Anderson, who expressed that very eloquently and represented most of the comments that night of people against EPCOR. So they're trying to use this document. Now, when you were at that meeting, did you ever hear condemnation of EPCOR during the planning process and supposed formulation of this document?
No, I didn't. In fact, there was a survey that was put out to the public during this planning phase, and the town likes to tote that they got over 400 responses to the survey. I'm not sure that that's 100% representative of the community, but nonetheless, the way the questions were posed certainly has an impact on the kind of answers that you receive. And we'd like to show you a clip where Councilor Jaramillo talks about how some of these questions may have been misleading, specifically in reference to the proposed takeover of the EPCOR water system.
I also really object to referencing this questionnaire because the questionnaire was worded very tricky. It did not say, would you like the town to take our private water system by eminent domain? It didn't say that. You cannot say that there were strong opinions for it when the survey wasn't even worded that way. The public that was responding to that was probably just clicking through and had no idea that that was the intent behind that question.
Let me refine that question for you. And I apologize if you found the language tricky. That was not the intent.
Well, if you wanted to know if the public was in favor of taking over EPCOR, you should have asked if the public was in favor of taking over EPCOR. You shouldn't word it in like a general way and then expect them to understand your intent and then refer to that over here in this report as if the public really did speak out for it. And in contradiction to that, it's saying that it was generated from discussions in the workshops, but Ms. Hubbard and Ms. Bird confirmed to me after last meeting that that topic did not come up.
So the survey results, the questionnaire was used to guide the discussions on the goals and objectives for the comp plan in the workshops, and everyone who attended the workshops hoped thoroughly vet the language. That was the methodology.
Can you read us that question?
Yes, let me find it for you. So the question read, Edgewood needs to develop its own water system.
Which is somewhat different than hostile takeoff of a privately owned water company.
If the intent is mistaken, the language can be changed. We do our best.
So here she's pointing out that the question itself on the survey had nothing to do with the condemnation of EPCOR. And that even in their survey, they said that it was divisive and there was mixed results. So it was about 50-50, not about the takeover of EPCOR, but the question was, should Edgewood start its own water company? Well, even with that kind of fluffy, innocuous kind of question, they still got 50% of the people against it. Had they asked the question that should the town go through a lengthy, costly, multi-million-dollar legal adversarial process to take over a system that's currently functioning adequately, it would have been an overwhelming no, and they knew that. So they're manipulating it to try to justify something they already want to do, which is the height of a disingenuous public process. They want the appearance of public input without ever considering public input.
Sure, and certainly one of the things that would be important to that question is the fact that EPCOR is not for sale.
Yeah.
We'd like to thank Councilor Adrian Jaramillo for taking the time to go through the comprehensive plan, to compare the language of the draft that was proposed in front of the council on November 20th to make sure that it's accurate and consistent with previous drafts of the comprehensive plan. We have a clip here that we'd like to show you from Councilor Holly where she says, I don't take the time to review these documents page by page for their consistency, and I trust the folks who are doing the work. Now, clearly, it appears to us that we cannot trust the folks who are doing the work, whoever they may be, because there are irregularities, one of which Councilor Jaramillo pointed out, which is huge, the discussion of the EPCOR takeover by including the recommendations from the preliminary engineering report that the town still hasn't voted on and hasn't been presented to council.
But there's new wording in here now.
I did not sit down and compare page to page. I had confidence in the folks that were doing this survey.
So you can see that what Councilor Holly is saying is her position is she's going with what the staff and Mr. Cog have done, which is clearly not adequate because it doesn't reflect the public's input. They've taken the public input and they have completely planted this thing in there about taking over EPCOR because that's what they want to do. So it should be a public process. It should reflect public, but like everything in this town government, the way it's been going is all top down, not bottom up. The people are supposed to give the input, and that's supposed to guide this document. Instead, they're inserting things and pretending like the public in some way supported this, which clearly they don't from our experience with our meetings and with the town council meeting.
Now we'd like to show you a clip of Councilor Jaramillo addressing the governing body and the public in attendance and discussing how important public input is, and public input needs to be reflected in the comprehensive plan because it's a vision document that guides the course of the town going forward. And we certainly think that her view is the proper view of how the public should be involved in the planning process for the town of Edgewood going forward.
I just want to say too that this comp plan is the responsibility of this governing body, not just everyone else who worked on it. So it is important that we do our due diligence and listen to the public, listen to what they want and don't want, and then make sure that that's reflected properly in this plan. And, you know, just because other people worked on it doesn't mean that we don't have the responsibility to thoroughly look at these things and make sure that the vision casting that this governing body is doing is reflected in here. I mean, it's really important because this drives the direction of our town, you know, the future of our town.
So she did a great job of talking about, we're all about openness and transparency because that's the way a democracy should work. It should be the will of the people that eventually guides everything that affects their lives in the town. So she's saying that they have due diligence, they have a responsibility to make sure that it does reflect this guiding document, this roadmap going forward of how the town's going to be, should be reflected of the public's input, not the top-down approach.
And we would absolutely agree.
This.
Another issue that's very important to the comprehensive plan is kind of how it started and its development through the Planning and Zoning Committee. And what we'd like to do is play you a clip of Councilor Jaramillo talking about that process and how it may have been corrupted from the start because of some problems that have recently come to light. And it's akin to the fruit of the poisonous tree. It doesn't matter how good it looks. At the end of the day, the genesis of it was improper, so whatever comes off of it is also improper. So here's that clip for you now.
First, I wanted to say that I'm really concerned about the nepotism issue. I wish it wasn't like this, just with the mayor having appointed Cheryl Huppert's and being a first cousin against the nepotism ordinance. And so this, I have the floor, Councilor Abrams.
We were discussing the comprehensive plan.
You yet again interrupt me. If you let me finish, I will let you know the relevance of this.
Does
So,
it have something to do with the comprehensive land use plan?
absolutely. You heard from Mr. Cog. Thank you, by the way, for being out here to answer our questions. You heard that the critical part of the committee on this was P&Z. And it really just has the appearance of impropriety to have a family member appointed against our own ordinance and kind of tainting this process. So I really do think that we need an independent commissioner to take a look at this when some of the other information is looked at. So that's my comment on nepotism and how that relates to the comprehensive plan. I just feel like it has the appearance of impropriety and undue influence into this process. That's why we have that ordinance.
So this perfectly explains how a public process that's supposed to produce this roadmap for Edgewood, and it's supposed to be reflective of the will of the people, ends up being so far off track, is the mayor hired his cousin to run this operation. The planning process, planning and zoning, is what Councilor Jaramillo was talking about. So she's heading this up, and they are guiding the way it eventually goes. And even after all the public input is presented to the town, some language is changed after the fact to try to support the takeover of EPCOR, which nobody wants.
And even if there weren't any improprieties, it gives the appearance of impropriety, the appearance of undue influence, the appearance that there could be something wrong with the process because you have this familial relationship that wasn't disclosed.
Yeah, it's not a neutral process. It's being affected through the nepotism and an undue influence of the mayor and his familial relationships.
And you can clearly see that nepotism has become a trigger word these days because the moment that Audrey brought it up, even though it was clearly related to the discussion about the comprehensive plan as we just discussed, you immediately got an objection from Councilor Abrams on a point of order because he thought that this was something unrelated. And there's this effort that seems to be continuing to try to cover up things that really need to have light shed on them.
Right, exactly. So here's Counselor Abrams trying to shut down the process. He's not even supposed to interrupt that. She has the floor. But he's trying to gag her around an issue because he knows that this is a bad thing for the mayor and it's a bad thing for him. So we've heard from Holly, we've heard from Abrahams, we've heard from Jaramillo. So what about Abrams? Where did he stand on this issue? Well, he tried to squelch the process, and now we'll see what was really, this clip will show what was really important to him that night. He said it was really a super important thing to him.
I noticed just about a week ago, and that is that on next door, Councilor Abraham produced a letter, or actually a series of correspondence between she and the mayor. And I'm not going to comment on much of the content of this, except to say that it was brought to light that Councilor Abraham may or may not be a resident of the town. And I would like to see that somehow or another we bring this to resolution, because it's very concerning to me. If she is a resident of the town, great. Thank you. Good. Show me the paper.
I have a lease agreement.
Excuse me, I'm speaking. It is my floor. I think we had this discussion earlier between I and Councilor Harvey. This isn't a discussion. I'm just asking the question. If there is documentation, please bring it. Please bring it, so that I can be assured that the votes of this council are legitimate.
Where's the mayor live?
Well, if a person is sitting in office and is not a resident of the community, then they are sitting the council position illegitimately. And their votes, therefore, do not count. And this is a matter that needs to be brought to our Attorney General. So I would like to get this resolved as quickly as
I'd like to
possible.
see the mayor's documentation too. He lives with his mother.
And that's all I have for this evening.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Rogers.
may I produce the documents that Councilor Abrams is looking for?
Bring another time.
Now, having watched the clip, it's hard to argue how important this issue was, because the proof he demanded was presented, and then he refused to look at it.
Yeah, he was aware of this because the letter that was on social media. Well, I read that, you read that, and at the very end, Councilor Abrahams points out she gave this information that proves her residency to the mayor back in August. But Councilor Abrams says he doesn't care because she didn't give it to him. Well, this is what the problem with the communication within the council. Nobody is getting anything from the mayor. It was presented to him, but Councilor Abrahams is now wasting the public's time and attacking one of the other councilors on an issue that was settled back in August.
And it's important to note that Councilor Sherry Abraham has been a champion for openness and transparency in town government. And during a break in the meeting, she even took the time to walk around the crowd, willing to show anybody who wanted to see a copy of her lease agreement to prove her residency.
Now that's openness.
As you know, openness and transparency is our ultimate goal. We're not here pushing any particular agenda, but we would like people to have the opportunity to participate in the affairs of local government and to be heard from about issues where they might have particular expertise. There's a clip that we'd like to show you that's in relation to discussion about appointments to the Parks and Recreation Committee for the town of Edgewood. And this is an instance where Councilor Jaramillo is trying to use the rules of order and operate within them as the mayor has set them out, and has asked to hear from a member of the public. What you'll see in the clip is that the request has to go through the mayor and then be voted on by council, and the rest is self-evident, and we'll let you make your own impressions.
When I did attend the last Parks and Rec meeting, there were some people there who had shown up, Mr. Seegers was one of them, who weren't aware that they had been, I guess, taken off the committee. And it was very confusing because they came here and they were ready to, be on the committee. And the director didn't really know about it and everyone was confused. So I would like an explanation on that. And I guess I'm just objecting to removing long-term members and then not notifying them and then bringing someone new forward.
Nobody was dismissed, their terms expired. And so he's come forward tonight offering to be on there, so we've got an opening to put him on it.
And they did express that they still wanted to serve. And if it's okay with you, Mayor, I would like to ask Mr. Seegers to have a word.
No, that's what we did.
I think you have to ask the governing body if they're, if they are willing to let Mr. Seegers talk.
There's nothing on the agenda though for doing that tonight. It's just a bang of their appointments have expired. We're looking for some other people.
Well, they were still willing to serve, and they weren't notified that they were removed. And I just think that in the rules that you read earlier, it said that you could ask to speak. Excuse me, I have the floor.
Actually, a point of order.
Yeah.
I believe we are in an action item, not a discussion item, and that a motion and second is before us. I call the question.
Just a minute, it is discussion, consideration, and action, and I haven't got a chance to make my discussion. My question based on what Councilor,
I'm sorry, but I have the floor here. So I need to appeal your decision because in the rules that you read earlier said that council members could ask to hear from a member of the public or a member of the governing body, and that the governing body has to vote on that. So I would like to hear from Mr. Seegers about what's happening with the Parks and Rec.
I had to vote with the governing body.
I'm just saying that's what I would like.
Start on that is Councilor Armio,
Aye.
Councilor Abraham.
Aye.
Councilor Abrams. Councilor Hawley.
Not surprising. Not surprising.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I don't think we need any comment. Thank you. You will have your moment.
You can also see how Councilor John Abrams is openly hostile to any input or comment from the public, including applause or gasps as they hear stuff that just doesn't pass muster.
And obviously, the audience is disturbed by it. Any normal person would be. What is going on in the town that they need to clamp down on the openness and transparency request? She just wanted to hear from somebody who had expertise in that area. That's how best decisions are made. Two heads are better than one, right? And these are people that live in the community. They're not somebody who's extraneous, some expert that we may not want to hear from.
And the town council has said on a number of occasions that they welcome public input. They would like you to contact them, particularly prior to meetings, so that you can express your views and opinions, and they can bring that forth in the meeting. So we would invite anybody who is watching this video to contact Councilor Hawley, to contact Councilor Abrams, to contact the mayor, and tell them we want the public to be heard from. We want an opportunity to participate.
And you've got 3 people on the council against that principle. You've got 2 people strongly for that principle. It would only take one of the other 3 to change their mind, and the public can do that. You can call them, you can email them, you can go to the office and let them know how you feel, that you want transparency and openness, because these are the issues that affect our lives. We should have that input as to how decisions are being made on our behalf, and our money being spent on sewers to nowhere that don't benefit anybody except a few people, and the water system takeover, which will, in my opinion, will benefit no one. We want trails that we were promised, we want paved roads we were promised, and we want lifestyle kind of improvements in our community.
Absolutely, and we think it's important to harness the talents and experience that certain individuals have in their fields of expertise developed over a course of time, as opposed to excluding that information and just getting what we receive from bureaucrats, the town staff, or outside contractors.
So let's look at that clip of what we were promised on when Mayor Bassett was elected on his platform. Here you see that the sewer is going to be kept along Old 66, which made sense to people. That's what they wanted. And he's saying we want to encourage public input from all sources. We want to not retaliate against our counselors, and we want to encourage them to be more forthcoming in the process and participate more. You can see that this is a classic bait and switch. Promise the people what they want, and then give them whatever it is you want.
Now what we'd like to do is give you a little update about some of the actions that we've been taking. We certainly had an opportunity to hear from the public at the public forum that we hosted at Legacy Church and through other avenues. In some cases, the phone has literally been ringing off the hook about some of these issues and the concerns that the public has with what the town is doing. So Jerry, why don't you go ahead and give the people an insight about some of the things that we're planning.
Well, we heard you loud and clear at the November 14 meeting, and people were wanting to know, well, what can we do to change this government into an open and transparent democracy that we all want? And some of the items that came up is removal from office, which for nepotism, which has been talked about. We have made significant progress on that. We're moving forward. That's going to be a legal action, so it's going to take some funding. And we're going to be doing some fundraising. We'll be updating you on that. The ballot initiative that we talked about, that it will force a new election. And this doesn't affect just the mayor. This is everybody will be up for election. And this was because they extended their terms for 2 years, and also the fact that they're going the opposite of what people want here. So we are making significant progress moving forward on that. We have taken the email addresses that were given at the sign-in sheets on the November 14 meeting and built a broadcast list where we can communicate with you without having to go through social media in a way that might be a little easier for the public. We've had lots of volunteers come forward, paralegal assistants, volunteers for internship on some of our matters. So organizational things are happening. Fundraising is happening. Communication, we're improving that through the email. We're going to be doing the fundraising for the legal actions that will ultimately get us to our goal. And as stated, there are a lot of people that wanted to do different things, and we are going down several avenues, 4 or 5 different avenues, because you never know which one of those will get the end result. But it's all about getting that result.
And part of the reason that we think that the nepotism issue is going to take legal action is because it is the responsibility of the mayor and the governing body to enforce the ordinances of the town. And we are pretty confident that the mayor is not going to enforce the nepotism ordinance against himself and remove himself. And clearly, given the current voting block of the council, we're not going to get a majority of votes to remove the mayor by enforcing the nepotism ordinance. And I think it's important to outline that the nepotism ordinance is very, very simple. It says that certain types of nepotism are prohibited. It defines who is a relative that would be disqualified under the ordinance. The appointment of Cheryl Hupperts was a violation of the ordinance, and the penalties provided are mandatory.
And I think it's clear from everything we've shown on this video that the reason it's important that the nepotism ordinance is so important is it protects the public from exactly what's happening, which is the manipulation of the process by a few to the detriment of the public ignoring their input.
We'd also like to invite you to check the Eye on Edgewood Facebook page or the Eye on Edgewood YouTube page, which both have complete recordings with video of the town council meeting from November 20th. And it'll give you an opportunity not only to hear what took place at the meeting, but to see the demeanor and reaction of the crowd and the governing body as we went through some of these contentious issues.